I sat in the glass-walled conference room, watching my boss, Lillian Drew, slide a thin folder across the table. My annual review. Through the glass walls, I could see my coworkers laughing and comparing their thick white envelopes stuffed with raised letters. My heart pounded as I opened my folder. Salary adjustment. Nothing. "We just didn't see leadership potential in you this year, Lauren," Lillian said, loud enough for others to hear. Her smile was sharp as a knife. "But I hope this motivates you to try harder." The humiliation burned through me like acid. Outside, my coworker Jake waved his raise letter in the air while others cheered. I forced my face to stay calm, but my nails dug deep into my palms under the table. Lillian leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying my reaction. "Any questions about your review?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. She had just publicly destroyed me in front of the entire office. Everyone could see me sitting in that glass box, getting nothing while they celebrated their wins. "Great. You can go back to your desk now." I stood on shaky legs, knowing this moment would change everything. You're probably wondering how I ended up here, sitting in that glass prison while my boss destroyed my career in front of everyone. Let me take you back to where it all started, because this story isn't really about that conference room. It's about what happened next. 3 months earlier, I had just finished the biggest project of my career. Our company's most important client was about to leave us. They were furious about missed deadlines and broken promises. If we lost them, half our team would be fired. I volunteered to save the account. For 8 weeks, I worked 70-hour weeks. I slept at the office twice. I missed my birthday, my best friend's wedding, and 3 family dinners. While I was drowning in work, Lillian was posting vacation photos from Greece. But I did it. I saved the account with a campaign so good that the client signed a 3-year extension. Everyone assumed I'd get the biggest raise in company history. Instead, I got nothing. 0. While Lillian took credit for her team's success and everyone else got rewarded for my work, that's when I realized the truth. Talent doesn't always win, but patience and planning do. Growing up in small-town Michigan taught me that hard work always pays off. My dad worked double shifts at the auto plant while my mom ran a bakery from our kitchen. Money was tight, but they never complained. They just worked harder. "Keep your head down and do good work," Dad always said. "The right people will notice." I believed him. All through high school and college, I followed that advice. I studied while other kids partied. I worked part-time jobs to pay for school. I graduated with honors and a marketing degree, ready to conquer the world. When I moved to Chicago at 22, I had 2 suitcases and a heart full of dreams. The city felt huge and scary, but I was determined to succeed. I took a tiny studio apartment and waited tables at night while sending out resumes during the day. For 6 months, I got nothing but rejection emails. Companies wanted experience I didn't have. It felt impossible to get started, but I kept believing that hard work would pay off eventually. Finally, a small PR firm called me back. The pay was terrible, but it was my chance. I took it without hesitation, ready to prove myself. At Avalon Solutions, I quickly became the person who did everything nobody else wanted to do. Late-night reports? That was me. Crisis calls at midnight? I answered them. Last-minute event planning when clients changed their minds? I handled it with a smile. The other employees called me eager beaver behind my back. But I didn't care. I was learning the business from the ground up. Every task taught me something new about how offices really worked. That's where I learned about office politics for the first time. It wasn't enough to do good work. You had to know the right people, say the right things, and play the game. Some employees coasted on charm, while others worked themselves to death for scraps. I watched carefully, taking mental notes about who had real power and who just pretended to. I learned to read between the lines during meetings. I figured out which projects actually mattered and which ones were just busy work. After 8 months, I got promoted to account coordinator. Nothing fancy, but it felt like progress. I was finally moving up the ladder, one rung at a time. But then, Lillian Drew joined our team, and everything changed. Lillian arrived like a hurricane in designer shoes. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, polished, and impossibly confident. She wore expensive suits and spoke in that smooth voice that made everyone listen. During her first week, she had lunch with the senior partners twice. I was impressed at first. Lillian seemed like the kind of successful woman I wanted to become. She commanded respect in meetings and had this way of making her ideas sound brilliant, even when they were pretty basic. "You have to think bigger, Lauren," she told me during our first one-on-one meeting. "Stop focusing on the small details and start seeing the big picture." I nodded eagerly, grateful for the advice. Lillian was clearly going places, and I wanted to learn from her. If I worked hard and stayed loyal, maybe she'd help me climb the ladder too. But over the following weeks, I started noticing things. Lillian was great at presenting ideas, but terrible at executing them. She'd dump projects on other people, then swoop in at the last minute to take credit. She charmed the bosses while treating assistants like furniture. Still, I told myself I could learn from her. I just had to prove my worth. Within 6 months, Lillian was promoted to account manager. 6 months after that, she became my direct supervisor. I congratulated her genuinely, hoping this would be my chance to shine under her leadership. "Lauren, I'm excited to work more closely with you," she said, flashing that perfect smile. "I have big plans for our team." Those big plans mostly involved me doing twice as much work while she took extended lunch meetings. Lillian had a talent for making herself indispensable to the senior partners while making everyone else feel replaceable. She started building her inner circle, a group of favored employees who got invited to after-work drinks and weekend company outings. They laughed at all her jokes and agreed with everything she said. In return, they got the best projects and glowing reviews. I wasn't invited to join this circle. During team meetings, Lillian would praise her favorites while barely acknowledging my contributions. She had this way of making me feel invisible without actually saying anything mean. But I kept working hard, believing that eventually my results would speak for themselves. I was still thinking like that small-town girl who believed hard work always gets rewarded. I had no idea how wrong I was. My best friend Mariah could see what was happening before I could. We'd known each other since my waitressing days, and she never sugarcoated the truth. "Lauren, she's playing favorites," Mariah said over dinner one night. "You're working twice as hard as those other people and getting half the credit." "It's not that simple," I defended. "Office dynamics are complicated. I just need to be patient." Mariah rolled her eyes. "Patient? You've been patient for 2 years. When's the last time Lillian actually recognized your work in front of the bosses?" I couldn't answer that question, which told me everything I needed to know. My relationship with my family was getting strained too. My mom called every Sunday, asking when I was coming home for a visit. I kept making excuses, too buried in work to take time off. "Honey, you sound exhausted," she said during one call. "Are you taking care of yourself?" The truth was, I wasn't. I was pouring everything into my job, hoping that eventually all the sacrifice would pay off. I lived on takeout and coffee, worked weekends, and had no social life outside of work events. But I told myself it was temporary, just until I proved myself. Everything changed when our biggest client, Axiom Industries, threatened to leave. They were furious about a botched campaign that had cost them sales. The account was worth 40% of our company's revenue. Losing them would mean massive layoffs. The senior partners called an emergency meeting. Everyone sat around the conference table looking terrified while the client's angry emails were read aloud. "We need someone to fix this immediately," said our CEO. "Who's willing to take this on?" The room was silent. This was a career killer project. If you failed, you'd be the scapegoat for the entire company's problems. My hand went up before I could stop myself. "I'll do it." Lillian's head snapped toward me, surprise flashing across her face. "Lauren, this is a very complex situation. Maybe someone with more experience should—" "I've studied their account thoroughly," I interrupted. "I know exactly what went wrong and how to fix it." The CEO nodded slowly. "All right, Lauren, you have 8 weeks to turn this around. If you succeed, you'll be a hero. If you fail—" He didn't need to finish that sentence. I walked out of that meeting knowing I'd just bet my entire career on one project. The next 8 weeks were the hardest of my life. I practically lived at the office, surviving on energy drinks and determination. While Lillian posted photos from her vacation in Santorini, I was rebuilding Axiom Industries' entire campaign from scratch. I studied their customer data until I could recite it from memory. I learned everything about their industry, their competitors, and their target market. I called their executives at all hours, asking questions and building relationships. Slowly, a brilliant strategy emerged. Instead of the generic approach they'd gotten before, I created a personalized campaign that spoke directly to their customers' needs. Every detail was perfect, from the color schemes to the timing of the launches. I slept at the office twice during those 8 weeks. My back ached from hunching over my computer. My eyes burned from staring at screens for 14 hours a day. But I could feel something special taking shape. The night before the big presentation, I sat alone in the empty office, reviewing my work one final time. Everything was ready. This campaign would save the account and prove what I was capable of. I just had to pray that the client would see it the same way. The presentation went perfectly. Axiom Industries. Executives loved every part of the campaign. They asked smart questions, nodded approvingly, and even smiled at my jokes. By the end of the meeting, they were ready to sign a 3-year extension. "This is exactly what we needed," their CEO said, shaking my hand. "Brilliant work, Lauren. You've saved our partnership." The room erupted in applause. My coworkers congratulated me, and even the senior partners looked impressed. For the first time in months, I felt like my hard work had actually paid off. Lillian stood in the corner, her smile tight and forced. She clapped politely, but said nothing. Later that day, she pulled me aside. "Good job on the presentation, Lauren. I'm proud of how my team performed under pressure." Her team. Not my work, but her team's performance. The credit was already being redistributed before the client had even left the building. But I didn't care. The results spoke for themselves. Everyone knew I'd saved the account single-handedly. Surely this would change everything. The annual reviews were coming up, and I was certain I'd finally get the recognition I deserved. I was already imagining the raise, the promotion, maybe even my own office. The weeks leading up to annual reviews were torture. Lillian's inner circle whispered about their expected raises, while I tried to stay focused on my work. Everyone assumed I'd get the biggest reward. After all, I just saved the company's most important account. Lillian seemed distant during our weekly one-on-ones. She'd ask about my current projects, but never mentioned the Axiom Industries' success. When other people brought it up, she'd quickly change the subject. "I'm sure you're excited about your review," Mariah said over coffee one Saturday. "I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much," I lied. The truth was, I couldn't think about anything else. This was my moment. All the long hours, missed weekends, and sacrificed relationships were about to pay off. I even started apartment hunting, confident that my raise would let me afford something better than my tiny studio. I browsed job listings at bigger companies, knowing that a promotion would open new doors. The night before review day, I could barely sleep. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when Lillian told me about my promotion. I'd be gracious but confident, professional but excited. I had no idea what was actually waiting for me. Review day arrived with electric energy in the office. People whispered excitedly about their meetings, and thick envelopes appeared on desks throughout the morning. Everyone who'd received their review looked happy, comparing raise percentages and bonus amounts. I watched through my cubicle walls as Jake got his envelope and immediately called his wife with the good news. Sarah from accounting actually squealed when she saw her numbers. Even the newest hire got a decent bump. My meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. As the hours crawled by, my confidence started to waver. Why was I going last? Usually, the biggest promotions were announced first to build excitement. At exactly 2 p.m., Lillian called me into the glass conference room. I walked across the office with everyone watching, their happy faces following my progress. This was it, my moment of triumph. Lillian had a thin folder waiting on the table. Not thick like the others, but maybe they kept the big promotions simple. She slid it across to me with that sharp smile. "Here's your review, Lauren." I opened it with trembling fingers, scanning down to the salary adjustment line. 0. Nothing. Not even a cost of living increase. The world tilted sideways as her words hit me like physical blows. We just didn't see leadership potential in you this year, Lauren, but I hope this motivates you to try harder." The words echoed in my head as I stared at that devastating zero. Around us, the office buzzed with celebration, while I sat frozen in my glass prison. Everyone could see me receiving nothing, while they'd all been rewarded. Lillian's voice seemed to come from underwater. "Your technical skills are solid, but leadership requires more than just completing tasks. It's about inspiring others, thinking strategically, building relationships. Building relationships, like the relationships I'd built with Axiom Industries while she was sipping wine on a beach. The strategic thinking that had saved our company's biggest account. Do you have any questions about your review?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. If I spoke, I might scream or cry or say something that would destroy what was left of my career. "Excellent. I'm sure you'll use this feedback to grow in the coming year." I stumbled back to my desk in a daze. Coworkers who'd been celebrating went quiet as I passed. They could see something was wrong, but nobody asked. Nobody wanted to risk their own good mood. I packed up my things mechanically, telling people I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't entirely a lie. That night, I called Mariah from my apartment floor, surrounded by takeout containers and tissues. "She gave you nothing?" Mariah's voice was sharp with fury. "After you saved their biggest client? Are you kidding me?" $0, I whispered. "Not even a token raise. Everyone else got something, but I got nothing." "Lauren, this is insane. You need to talk to HR or her boss or someone. This is discrimination." But I knew it wasn't that simple. Lillian was too smart to leave obvious evidence. She'd found the perfect way to push me out without getting her hands dirty. Public humiliation wrapped in corporate speak. I lay awake all night, replaying every moment of that meeting. The way she'd smiled when she delivered the blow, how she'd made sure everyone could see me getting nothing, the calculated cruelty of it all. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to quit in anger or storm into HR with complaints. I wasn't going to give Lillian the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I was going to do something much worse. I was going to plan. "If she wants to play games," I told my reflection in the bathroom mirror, "then let's play." I returned to work the next day with a new strategy. On the surface, I'd be the same dedicated employee I'd always been. But underneath, I'd start building something Lillian couldn't touch. The first step was securing my relationships with the clients Lillian avoided, the difficult ones who demanded perfection and asked tough questions. While she focused on easy wins with friendly clients, I'd make myself indispensable to the ones nobody else wanted to handle. Axiom Industries was already in my corner after the successful campaign. I started reaching out to them more frequently, not for work, but to build genuine relationships. I learned about their families, their hobbies, their long-term business goals. Within a month, their CEO was specifically requesting me for all major projects. "Lauren just gets our brand," he told our senior partners during a meeting. "We prefer working directly with her." Lillian's smile looked more strained each time a client praised my work. She tried to insert herself into these relationships, but the clients were polite but firm. They wanted Lauren, not her boss. I documented everything carefully. Every email where clients praised my work. Every meeting where my strategies proved successful. Every time Lillian took credit for my results. I was building a case, piece by piece. My documentation system became obsessive but necessary. I kept screenshots of emails, saved voice recordings of meetings, where legal, and maintained detailed logs of every project I completed. When Lillian presented her team's success to the senior partners, I noted the date and which specific work she was claiming. When clients thanked me directly for results, I saved those communications. The pattern was clear. I did the work, she took the credit. But now I had proof. My birthday came and went with only Mariah and one coworker remembering. Lillian walked past my desk without acknowledgement, despite the small cake Mariah had sent to the office. It was a tiny slight, but it stung more than the big ones somehow. That night, I added it to my log. Not because forgotten birthdays were grounds for lawsuits, but because they showed a pattern of disrespect that went beyond professional disagreements. I was creating a complete picture of Lillian's leadership style. Every excluded meeting, every ignored suggestion, every time she made me feel invisible. Individual incidents could be explained away, but the pattern was damning. Meanwhile, I kept building my external relationships and quietly exploring my options. 6 months after my devastating review, opportunity knocked in an unexpected way. A massive potential client reached out to our company, Beacon Corporation, a tech giant looking for a complete brand overhaul. The contract was worth more than all our other accounts combined. During the initial meeting, something magical happened. Beacon's marketing director mentioned Axiom Industries as a reference point for the kind of work they wanted. "We've heard great things about the campaign you did for Axiom," she said. We specifically asked them who handled that project. All eyes turned to Lillian, but she had to admit the truth. Lauren Briggs was the lead on that account. "Wonderful. We'd like Lauren to head up our project as well." I watched Lillian's face carefully. She couldn't object without looking petty, but she couldn't take credit with the client sitting right there. For once, she was trapped by the truth. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Lauren will be the lead, with my oversight and guidance." But Beacon's marketing director shook her head. "Actually, we prefer to work directly with the account lead. We find too many layers of management slow things down." I bit my lip to hide my smile. This client had just cut Lillian out of her own deal. While working on the Beacon project, I started quietly interviewing with rival agencies. I was careful about it, meeting with headhunters during lunch breaks and taking calls from my apartment after hours. Word had gotten around the industry about my Axiom Industries success. Several companies were interested in poaching me, especially if I could bring clients along. "Your reputation precedes you," said the CEO of Wellington Partners during our third interview. "We've heard you're the real talent behind Avalon's recent wins." I didn't confirm or deny anything, but I did mention my strong client relationships. Within a week, Wellington offered me a senior account director position with a 50% salary increase and equity in the company. The offer came with one interesting wrinkle. They'd guarantee to take on any clients who wanted to follow me, providing those relationships were legitimately mine and not Avalon's property. I asked for 2 weeks to consider the offer, knowing I'd need that time to execute my plan perfectly. This wasn't just about getting a better job, it was about sending a message. Meanwhile, the Beacon project was going brilliantly. They loved every presentation, and their contract was heading toward final approval. One unexpected ally emerged during this period. Richard Conway, one of the senior partners I'd barely interacted with before. He pulled me aside after a company meeting where Lillian had once again claimed credit for my work. "Lauren, I've been watching your career here," he said quietly. "Your client results speak for themselves. If you ever need a reference or want to discuss your future at this company, my door is open." It was a subtle but significant statement. Richard had noticed the disconnect between my work and Lillian's recognition. He was offering himself as protection if I needed it. But I didn't need protection anymore. I needed an exit strategy. The Beacon contract was in its final stages. They'd already indicated they wanted to sign a 3-year deal worth $8 million. When that happened, I'd be responsible for bringing in the largest client in company history. It would also be the perfect time to leave. I practiced my resignation speech in the mirror, timing it perfectly. The bomb had to be dropped at exactly the right moment for maximum impact. Everything was falling into place. The Beacon contract was officially signed on a Tuesday morning. Their CEO called to congratulate me personally, praising the innovative strategy and flawless execution. By noon, word had spread through the office that we'd landed the biggest deal in company history. Lillian basked in the glory, accepting congratulations from the senior partners as if she'd personally closed the deal. During the impromptu celebration in the conference room, she gave a speech about her team's incredible dedication. I stood in the back of the room, watching her take credit one final time. Several people glanced at me, knowing the truth, but nobody corrected her. That was the way it had always been, and the way it would continue to be if I stayed. That afternoon, I finalized my acceptance with Wellington Partners. My start date would be Monday, exactly 6 days away. I'd resigned from Avalon Solutions at the peak of my success, taking the Beacon relationship with me. But I hadn't told Lillian yet. I was saving that conversation for Friday morning, during our regular team meeting when the entire department would be present. She had humiliated me publicly. It was only fair that I return the favor. Friday morning arrived with unusual energy in the office. People were still buzzing about the Beacon deal, and Lillian had scheduled a team meeting to discuss exciting developments in our department. I arrived early, placing my resignation letter in a sealed envelope on the conference table. My hands were steady, my mind clear. After months of planning, the moment had finally come. The team gathered around the table, 12 people who'd watched Lillian take credit for my work time and time again. She stood at the head of the table, radiating confidence and authority. "Before we discuss our exciting new projects, I have an announcement," I said, standing up. Lillian looked surprised but nodded for me to continue. "I'm resigning from Avalon Solutions, effective immediately." I slid the envelope across to Lillian. "My last day is today." The room went silent. Lillian's face drained of color as she processed what I'd just said. "Lauren, this is very sudden. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's more," I continued. "Beacon Corporation has decided to move their account to Wellington Partners, where I'll be starting as Senior Account Director on Monday." Now Lillian looked genuinely panicked. "That's not all," I continued, my voice calm and professional. "Axiom Industries has also decided to consolidate their marketing with Wellington Partners. They specifically requested to continue working with me." Lillian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Around the table, my former coworkers sat in stunned silence. "Lauren, you can't just take our clients," Lillian finally managed. "There are non-compete clauses, contractual obligations." "Actually, I can," I replied. "I've reviewed my employment contract thoroughly. The clients chose to follow me based on their satisfaction with my work. Wellington Partners' legal team has confirmed everything is completely above board." The truth was devastating in its simplicity. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply built relationships strong enough that clients preferred working with me over staying with Avalon Solutions. Richard Conway appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. His expression was unreadable as he assessed the situation. "Is this accurate, Lauren? About the client departures?" I nodded. "Beacon and Axiom have both confirmed their intentions in writing. I believe their contracts with Avalon expire at the end of this month. 2 accounts representing nearly 60% of our department's revenue, gone in the span of a 5-minute conversation." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, the senior partners called an emergency meeting to assess the damage. Losing Beacon and Axiom Industries meant potential layoffs and a devastating blow to the company's reputation. I cleaned out my desk while the executive team huddled in conference rooms, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Former coworkers approached me with a mixture of admiration and fear. "I can't believe you actually did it," Jake whispered. "Lillian looks like she's about to have a heart attack." Indeed, Lillian had spent the entire afternoon on the phone, presumably trying to convince the clients to stay. But both Beacon and Axiom were firm in their decisions. They wanted to work with me, not Avalon Solutions. By closing time, rumors were already circulating about an internal investigation into the department's leadership. When clients worth millions of dollars choose to leave with a single employee, it raises serious questions about management effectiveness. I left the office for the last time carrying a small box of personal items and a sense of profound satisfaction. The scared girl who'd sat in that glass conference room was gone. In her place was someone who understood that respect isn't given, it's taken. The investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Within 2 weeks, I heard through former colleagues that the senior partners were conducting formal reviews of departmental leadership. They were asking pointed questions about client relationships, employee retention, and management practices. 3 more employees had quit in the aftermath of my departure, citing lack of recognition and poor leadership. The exodus was becoming a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Lillian tried to reach out to me twice, once through email and once through a mutual contact. Both times, she wanted to discuss the situation and find a mutually beneficial resolution. I declined both attempts. There was nothing left to discuss. By the end of the month, I heard the news through the industry grapevine. Lillian Drew was no longer with Avalon Solutions. The official statement mentioned pursuing new opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. She'd been fired for losing the company's most valuable accounts and driving away their most productive employee. I was in my new corner office at Wellington Partners when I heard the news, reviewing strategy documents for the Beacon campaign. I felt a moment of satisfaction, then returned to work. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about gloating. It was about building something better. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office overlooking downtown Chicago, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Wellington Partners had become one of the city's fastest-growing agencies, largely due to the clients I'd brought with me. Beacon Corporation's brand overhaul had won 3 industry awards. Axiom Industries had expanded their contract to include digital marketing and event planning. Both relationships had grown beyond what they'd ever been at Avalon Solutions. My phone buzzed with a text from Mariah. "Saw the article about your promotion to VP. So proud of you." The promotion had been announced that morning. At 31, I was the youngest vice president in Wellington's history. The scared girl from small-town Michigan had finally found her place in the corporate world. I thought about Lillian sometimes, wondering where she'd landed after Avalon. But those thoughts were brief and without malice. She'd taught me valuable lessons about power, respect, and the difference between leadership and management. The biggest lesson was the simplest. Revenge isn't about shouting the loudest or making the biggest scene. Sometimes it's just about walking away so quietly that they don't hear the floor falling out from under them until it's too late. Outside my window, the city sparkled with infinite possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to prove myself. But tonight I was exactly where I belonged.